Now going to move on, and quite a nice segue, touching on multimodal there, move into kind of shared mobility, which of course has a huge part to play in that. Olga Anapryenka, associate from New Mobility at Steer, and also the co-founder of Women in Mobility UK. We're now going to have a look at the role of shared mobility in decarbonisation. Olga.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you for introduction again. I think if we can start with the presentation. So today I'd like to talk about the role of shared mobility. And I think the first question which we need to ask, what is shared mobility? I think if we move to the next slide, for the purpose of today, I won't touch on all the shared mobility modes. I'll be concentrating on shared micromobility, shared cars. In this case, it's car clubs, as they're known in the UK. In Europe, you use the terminology car sharing. And we'll finish with the mobility hubs as kind of a way to bring all the modes together on the ground, like a physical representation of integration of different modes. Next slide, please. And one more time. Sorry for so many placeholders. I guess in terms of why we're talking about shared mobility, if we look at the key trends, which is the transport industry is experiencing at the moment, of course, we're moving to zero-emission vehicles, and electrification is one of them. We have increase in shared mobility use, which is also driven by behavioral change and some of the political and environmental drivers. We have the move to connected autonomous vehicles, which is kind of one of the trends which we can't ignore, but probably will be even more relevant within the next decade. New modes for deliveries and kind of consolidation of freight. It's been also one of the areas which have been discussed recently, and mobility hubs. In terms of the other trends, within the shared micromobility, for example, we have the diversification of the modes and new modes being introduced. So we've seen with the recent years, e-scooters have become more prominent, and we think that more light electric vehicles types of vehicles will be introduced going forward. Urban air mobility is something more futuristic, but every time I'm been asked about it, I think it may happen faster than we imagine, and especially in the geographies like Middle East. And the last bit is the curbside management, and basically the flexible use of curb and digitalization of curb. I think it's one of the topics which will be more prominent going forward. But today we're talking about shared mobility, and I think it's right for us to touch on this topic as it's one of the major trends. Next slide, please. So in terms of the shared mobility definition, I think it's as simple as it is. So basically, all the modes of transport services which can be shared and accessed on demand. And well, basically, as I mentioned, shared mobility includes shared micromobility, shared cars, shared rides. So we're talking about ride hailing, and also on-demand services. So digital demand responsive transport will fall within shared mobility too. And of course, lift share. Next, please. I think you can scroll too. So if we start with the shared micromobility, so it kind of consists of different lightweight vehicles, including bikes, e-bikes, e-scooters, and cargo bikes, which are shared through the digital platform. I think one of the key differences between lease and shared is that shared micromobility is accessed on a short-term basis, and it's basically one-way trips, while lease is a longer rental period, and it's not necessarily one-way trips. I think it's the greatest opportunity for shared mobility is to prove its flexibility. So if it's developed in the right way, it provides a good alternative to private cars, and also kind of it's environmentally friendly and allows to reduce lots of carbon. Next slide, please. If you look at the shared mobility in the UK, in this case, we're looking at car clubs and shared micromobility. There are a couple of stats and a couple of companies. So think some of the companies are not operating in the UK anymore, but the market is quite fluid, and it changes all the time. Some companies are consolidated, some companies are no longer in the market. But generally, it's around 39 bike share schemes. This was the data from 2022. 31 e-scooter trial schemes. So e-scooters are legally classified in the UK as cars, basically. And at the moment, there are a range of trials being implemented with the idea to change the national legislation and introduce a new category, which will be applied for e-scooters. There are about 4,859 car club vehicles. That was in 2022. I think I've updated that number on another slide. And there is a good number of car club members too. So the interesting trend is popping up e-cargo share schemes. In the UK, it's not as widespread as in Europe. They're more established in Europe, and there is a good initiative which is called e-hubs, which is happening in Belgium, and it's actually in 6 countries, including the UK. But as one of the initiatives is introducing e-cargo bike share schemes as part of the Mobility Hubs development, and I think it makes lots of sense. Next slide, please. So if we look at the shared e-scooter trials in England, so basically in the UK, it's only in England where they're being trialed at the moment. There are no trials in Scotland or Northern Ireland. So you can see the vast kind of diversity of it. So it's not just pure urban centres. You have some trials in a smaller scale trials in areas with quite low population. Interestingly, Bristol is one of the prominent trials, and it's one of the most successful trial locations in the UK. Recently, they retendered the operator, so TIA won the contract. It used to be Voi. In terms of London, so you have 3 operators across 10 London boroughs. Also, London is not a very successful scheme compared to other locations, and it's been blamed due to the complexity between the cross-border operations between different boroughs, and also lack of density of micromobility parking. And Coventry has been popped out. It's actually because Coventry post the trial based on the feedback received from the residents, and there was kind of lots of accidents, or not lots of accidents, but there was some noise, and the public were opposed, so they paused this trial, and at the moment it's only available in Warwick University. Next slide, please. I think if you look at different aspects of trip plans, carbon emission safe, journey purpose, and mod shifts between bikes and e-scooters, you can see that kind of the risk remit for both, and each vehicle and service has a certain use case. And you can see that the carbon emissions, if we think about the benefits, are quite good. And also in terms of the journey purpose, these modes are being used for commute. So kind of reinforcing the point that shared bikes and shared e-scooters help to decrease private car ownership, and they are used for commute as a kind of employers be alerted, or think about how you can encourage your employees to use this type of vehicles. And in terms of the mod shift, I think there's also quite good evidence of both e-bikes and e-scooters supporting the mod shift. Next slide, please. Yeah, so if we can summarize the benefits, you will read the stats. I think the first one, it could be considered a cheaper transport alternative compared to private cars. So you only access the vehicles on demand, and the cost of using the bike share or e-scooter share will be cheaper than cost of petrol fuel plus MOT for the cars. You exercise. Even if you use e-bike, you still exercise. So it's not just you pedal and it has no benefits. So even e-bikes considered to bring you health benefits. Same with the e-scooters. It's also the matter of being outside. And there are also the studies which show that it increases the well-being. So it's also not just physical health, but mental health too. First last mile travel. So both modes are considered to be supporting the first and last mile travel, and encourages the multimodal travel overall. And also it reduces the journey times. And the last bit is about encouraging the mod shift. So there is this stat, I think, well, I have the sources, but this is more on the European level rather than UK, that 34% of e-bike trips replace car trips and 40% of e-scooter trips replace car trips. So that's quite a substantial number if you look at it in the overall mix of transport. Next slide, please. Other benefits, we kind of were implied when I talk about others, is congestion reduction and subsequent improved air quality, increased public transport accessibility and inclusive transportation. So in terms of when we speak about accessibility as a fact that you can introduce a bike share and e-scooter share in the areas which are not being covered by public transport, basically encouraging access to opportunities, including jobs, opportunities to jobs and healthcare and education. Next slide, please. This kind of a couple of case studies which I've put up. So the first one is the Solent e-scooter trial. The data which is presented is based on January 2022. So it hasn't been updated since, but it's kind of a good representation of what has happened by then. A good start at 40% of e-scooter trips replaced car taxi trips, which also translates in the carbon benefits. You can see that 126 tons of CO2 equivalent saved during the period the trial ran up to January 2022. The trial is still running. It's just that we haven't looked at the data. Almost like 700,000 trips been made on e-scooters, which is a good number, and 48,000 users registered with the scheme. Around the Solent area. It actually covers Isle of Wight, Portsmouth and Southampton. Portsmouth and Southampton is areas where Voi, e-scooter operator, is offering their services, and in Isle of Wight it's Beryl. Interesting that the average distance for the trip was 3.6, which is not that short, and it's not that long, obviously, but it's not like 1 mile or 1.2 miles, which kind of shows also the opportunity for this transport mode to be used for last mile or first mile mode of transport. Next, please. The other one is Brighton Bike Share. So basically, it's one of the most successful bike share schemes in the UK. It says future plans 2023, so that's happening right now. The scheme has been recently retendered, and Beryl won this tender. So Beryl is operating the scheme now. As I said, the data is from 2021, but it gives you good representation. So I think one of the interesting facts is that, as I mentioned, the scheme is very popular and it's regularly exceeds 4 trips per bike per day, which basically means that it's affordable and it's making money. One of the reasons I think it's type of populations, the way the scheme's been launched, there's good enough parking density for the bike share base, and also residents use the scheme too. It's not just the visitors, but in general, Brighton is the area where you have lots of students and also you have lots of visitors from London. Next, please. I think now we're moving to car clubs, and I need to speed up. So if we move to the next slide, I'd say lots of people know what the car club is, but if not, just read the slide. I'll touch on the different car club models. So you have back to bay. This is the most common model, which is being currently used in the UK. It's basically when you hire a car and you need to return it to the same area and to the same designated car club bay. One-way flex. So this is a new model and it's more popular in Europe, and it's actually growing model. It's also called free floating car club model. Not in the UK, but in Germany, for example, it's very popular. It allows you to leave the car and do the one-way trip. Back to area, it's where you need to return the car club to not to the same place, but to the same street, for example, and the operators look their permits, parking permits for it. Next slide, please. And 2 other models, which I think was mentioned, is peer-to-peer. So basically allowing people to offer their private vehicles for the shared use. And community car clubs, which are mainly introduced in the lower density population areas, and they're normally run by local members and as a local initiative. Next, please. Car club landscape in the UK. On the left is the numbers from the latest dashboard available on Commuting UK website. Also, if you're not aware about Commuting UK, go on their website. It has a vast majority of information on shared mobility in UK and in Europe. Good starts, and it's a very good resource to use and to rely on. They have a range of guides developed, which are really useful for local authorities too, and also for employers who are looking to implement shared transport modes to support staff travel. Next, please. Okay, well, benefits quite similar to shared bikes, but slightly different. Of course, there is a growing trend of using electric vehicles or hybrids within the car club fleets, which also allows to reduce congestion, to improve air quality and reduce carbon emissions. Generally, the car club in the UK, the start is that there's one car club in the UK removes around 20 private cars off the road, which is very powerful statistics if you think about what overall travel and overall transport mix. Next, please. Also, cheaper transport alternative to run in a car. It will depend on how often you need to use the car. So there are calculators available, and you can actually try to compare. It won't be always cheaper, but in general, if you only use your car once or twice per week, that will be cheaper. Also, if you have 2 cars per household, that could be one of them. You can give up one of them and use car club instead. It does actually, the users of car clubs are more inclined to use alternative transport modes, which are sustainable transport modes, and start to cycle and use shared micromobility, and also generally increase the use of buses too. Next, please. This is kind of 2 benefits, more about introduction of car clubs by employers. Basically, it's savings. It can save you on staff travel and basically business travel, but also it reduces the parking pressures for employers. Next, please. So this is a case study in Highland Council. They've been working with Enterprise Car Club and deployed about 60 car club vehicles across different offices, and they have the offices are quite spread out and in different locations. They deployed a fleet of hybrids and some electric vehicles, and it was purely funded by the council. And in terms of kind of the impact of the scheme, it was about $1 million reduction in travel costs and lots of carbon being saved. And it's quite a popular scheme. Next one, please. As a Siemens, as I've also been working with Enterprise Car Club. So in this case, they had a fleet of the pool vehicles, which they've replaced with the car club vehicles, which also had savings. Am I running out of time? Am I?
Well, we're going to hopefully hear a lot more from you, Olga, in our following panel discussion. But yeah, I think it's going to be coming up very soon. But that was really interesting. I think there's definitely a few things we want to pick up on there with you.
Yeah, or probably a last thing to add. We finished with the car club. The last couple of slides were about mobility hubs, and as mentioned, it's a physical representation of integration of transport modes, and it's been a very popular initiative around Europe. There are lots of hubs established, especially in Bremen, and also there are benefits of how mobility hubs introduction supports introduction of car clubs and shared micromobility. And for employers, if there is a local authority which is thinking about introducing mobility hub, maybe your place is a good one to put one in. Thank you.
Great. Well, we can pick that up shortly. We are going to be, so Olga will be back for our panel discussion shortly, which is how organizations are innovating to reduce their commuter emissions.